So welcome back, everybody. So we'll start our discussion with looking at the 2021 predictions. So I have made a initial list of five of my top predictions. So I would like you to contribute your predictions and add more to this list and make it more clear. Okay. So these are the top 5 predictions, the first version from my side. Let me just explain each one of them, and then we can brainstorm and make this list even bigger if you want. The first thing which I see is increased attention to predictive analytics. As most of you know, you can classify analytics into 3 major buckets: descriptive, which is what happened in the past; predictive, what will happen in the future; and prescriptive, what are the factors which will give us the best course of action. So traditionally, at least till COVID, the focus has been mainly on descriptive analytics through reports and dashboards, and to some extent on predictive analytics, both analyst-driven predictive analytics such as regression, or even the data-driven predictive analytics such as machine learning. So I personally believe the future in the coming months is going to be more on prescriptive analytics, which includes mainly optimization and sensitivity analysis. The main reason for that is basically companies are constrained with resources. There is less money in the market. The world's economy has shrunk by approximately 10%. So there is going to be constraint on time, constraint on money, constraint on labor, so on and so forth. So companies want to optimize whatever resources they have at their disposal, and that's the reason why I believe predictive analytics is going to be an important factor, at least for the next few months and years. So what do you guys think about the first point before we go to the next one?
Can I go, Prashant?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I concur. I also think that some of the predictive analytics also will be of focus, especially forecasting. Demand forecasting, all the models went out of whack, especially on B2C side. The challenge of prescriptive is an effect because the prediction did not work. There was no supply. The demand was there. There was, let me put it this way, Clorox wipes, tissue papers, bathroom tissues, consumer behavior driven demand could not be forecasted properly, and the demand forecasting was not consistent, which caused the optimization, the resource allocation as a result of it. So I would think some of the predictive also will get back into focus.
Okay, absolutely. In fact, predictive and prescriptive go hand in hand. Decision making basically is a combination of these 2 factors. Great point, Venkat. So just a reminder, Pavana, can you keep a clock so that for each of these items we can keep about 5 to 6 minutes? So when we are reaching a 4-minute clock, can you just put a note in the chat that 4 minutes is up, so that the next 2 minutes can be used to wrap up each of those points?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay. So what are the thoughts from others?
This is Gary. This is semantics. I just, on the continuum, it goes, descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive. Optimization, can scare people, linear programming and so forth. What I like about predictive, which is the stage just before it, is it allows for what if scenarios. It allows for sensitivity analysis, increase sales forecast 5%, recalculate, see the results. So I'm kind of a fan of predictive more so, because I think that's where you do a lot of experimentation and discovery and testing. Prescriptive kind of, is answering of all the choices you could make, what's the best choice? But I think the learning comes what precedes it. What are all the choices? So I'm a big fan of I would put predictive and prescriptive. You said they go hand in hand, but the predictive precedes prescriptive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Chris, you had something to say?
Yeah, I have like a sixth prediction for you in general, but I'll speak a bit on prescriptive analytics. So one of the things about prescriptive analytics that I'm seeing from the payload side is that for us, so just give people some background for payload. What we do is we deal in logistics and in particular field ticketing and stuff like that, right? So and regulatory manifests and all the different aspects that go about in the transportation of goods from site to site. And what we're seeing in our market is a shift in general to further automate decision making. So I agree with what Gary's saying. He makes a very good point in terms of predictive being good for theory crafting and what if scenarios, right? And that's always going to be key. I don't think you'll ever displace that entirely, except there are some systems where full automation is desirable. So much like an assembly line where you want things to be fully prescriptive because you don't want someone in there doing gut type decisions. You want it all to be turnkey. That's a different scenario than say managing a company where you do want that predictive side, right? So what I'm seeing in our field is there's definitely a shift more and more towards prescriptive where companies are starting, like a couple of my competitors, in fact, have actually started to look at the idea of having a full turnkey automated solution that takes away that control and just you simply pay into their system. It takes care of deciding when and where your materials are going to be moved and how and by whom. I feel that, and so to get to the point and make my comment on prescriptive analytics, it's my feeling that the dichotomy between predictive and prescriptive is going to increase over the next few years as we start to see the market definitely drive towards prescriptive. So I certainly agree with you, Prashant. I think prescriptive is going to be the focus. The challenge is going to be everyone gets that new tool, like that nice shiny hammer, and they want to use it for everything, right? And so I think that what we're going to see is we're going to see a rapid adoption and aggressive move towards prescriptive. And I think that we're going to find it works good in some areas, less so in others. And there'll be that pendulum will kind of come back to rest and balance out over the next decade. So that's certainly what I'm seeing in my industry. I'm definitely seeing this applied in many areas. And I think it's very good for many systems to allow full automation. But I do think there will be some challenges, and that will be the topic of the next decade.
Okay, excellent. Any other thoughts? I see a couple of comments.
Yeah, this is Santosh. I think the time is up, and I think Chris made an excellent point there, right? I think the time for prescriptive is very. I think there's a blurring line between automation, right? Automation of task, right? I think the low level task is where you you automate the end-to-end process. Again, this manual intervention, predictive analytics, and then decision making to make it prescriptive. I think that's going to take some time, right? To be fully automated, and what type of tasks fall into that bucket versus those decisions which needs to have a human intervention before you can take an action, right? And I think that's going to take a while, right? As Chris said, it's just because you have it, you can't use it, right? You have to think through all the repercussions of fully automating a process, right? Do you really require human intervention? If it's a low-level process, yes, makes perfect sense. If not, you got to think twice before switching on the switch and say, you know what, let's go from predictive to prescriptive. So I think it's going to be based on the industry and the process.
Okay, excellent. So in the interest of time, let's go forward. If you have a few minutes left, we can come back and discuss holistically. And I believe a couple of people have got other things as well. Chris has already said number 6. So we'll have some time for that. Okay, let's look at the second. Sorry, Gary?
Yeah, this is Chetan this side. I just wanted to add one more stuff. I think optimization will also play a key role in, along with prescriptive analytics. I think optimization will be something which companies will be looking into for sure, based on the fact that the economy has shrinked like by 10%, that they would be using the resources which they have. So I think prescriptive would go along with optimization for sure.
Okay.
This is what I think.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get started. Let's start with the second one. So the EPM dashboards, where Gary is an expert in the balanced scorecard field, enterprise performance management. So going forward, we'll focus more on ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance aspects. So COVID has shown all of us that we have to take care of the environment, we have to take care of the community and everything. So going forward, I believe the future, the metrics and the dashboard will be centered more on ESG. I already had 3 meetings on this front this year itself on companies which are talking about ESG. And at the same time, it's not just about this fluffy stuff. Oh, we want to be more about environment and all those things. So going forward, more and more investments are going to be based on companies' commitment towards ESG. If you look at the companies, for example, the oil companies, which are based in Calgary, for example, if you go to Cenovus Energy, which is poised to become one of the biggest oil companies in Canada now, they have a separate page dedicated for ESG these days. Why? One of the main reasons is not just to show their commitment on the environmental aspects, but also to get more investment. So this is where I see most of the dashboarding work, which has been centered around internal processes and metrics these days, would be looking more outward on ESG and other KPIs as well. So companies would look for how to capture this data, how do you bring it to the dashboard, and how do you present it to not just the stakeholders internal to the company, but even stakeholders outside the company as well, including the community, the government, regulators, public, investors, and so on. So what are your thoughts on point number 2?
Hi, everyone. I think I really agree with this one very strongly, Prashant, because I think that in the economic forecast over the next few years, we can expect the government to be pumping huge investment into infrastructure and many other industries across the board. And in order to access a lot of those government programs, a number of industries are going to have to make provable claims on environmental, social, and governance fronts. So I think that this is significant for a number of industries to be able to access government programs that'll be rolling out cash into their industries.
Okay, excellent. Sarah Jane.
Agree. This is Venkat. Agree, Prashant. KPI definition. The new KPIs in the wake of black swans, high impact, low frequent epidemics, pandemics, the traditional finance-based KPIs probably will be replaced by new KPIs, more measurable. How soon I can recover, how much risk I am taking, how much risk I am carrying in my supply chain or in my business. Currently, the risk measurement is not forward-looking, it's backward, looking at the balance sheet. So definition of new KPIs and the corresponding dashboards. And I am little worried that organizations do not have enough data to complement new KPIs. They were struggling with the digitalization, how to measure new KPIs and the dashboards. With this disruptions, it demands more new KPIs and hence new KPIs, new dashboards. We can talk more on that, but there are 3-4 definite metrics Now almost MIT is championing. MIT is partnering with some consulting companies to understand how much risk you carry, not only just software, just in your entire software base. We can talk more. I'll stop there.
Okay, I see a couple of messages as well. Yeah, you can share your thoughts. Who wants to go next? Okay, so let's start with, let's look at the third prediction, which is, I believe, increased convergence of AI, machine learning, and analytics platform around 4 key vendors. So today the market is extremely crowded, but I feel that in the next few months and years, it will consolidate around 4 major vendors. Amazon, with all their offerings on the cloud and AI and everything. Google, which is kind of a late entrant to the enterprise market. By the way, when I talk about point number 3, it is mainly on the enterprise world, which is basically the business world. Google, which is kind of a late entrant to the enterprise or digital and enterprise space, but they're catching up very fast. Microsoft, and the fourth dark horse, I would say, is Salesforce. If you look at what Salesforce has done in the last 18 months, they acquired MuleSoft. After that, they acquired Tableau. And in the few weeks back, they acquired Slack. And there is a strong rumor that is going on in the industry that Salesforce might acquire SAP. So I believe there's going to be, in the next few months, the consolidation of the convergence of AI and analytics platform would happen around these 4 vendors: Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Salesforce. So is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, you don't think IBM is a player, Prashant? Because they, again, on the cloud side, they have tools, definitely. Plus, if you look back, I mean, IBM has got a lot of the data, especially on the financial services. So I think they'll be a key player as well.
Okay. So, yeah, what do others say? So Suresh has got a good vendor here, IBM, which we have, which has got a huge track record, or an illustrious track record. What do you guys think about IBM, or even some of the other players, probably SAP, for instance? What would SAP?
About SAP, but Oracle, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Oracle could be also one other, player, because yeah, they have heavy investments. I mean, this is cyclic, right? I mean, this is a cycle. I think about every 15, 20 years, there is this consolidation, and the big companies break up, their specialist software into smaller divisions, right? I don't know. IBM makes sense, potentially Oracle. I don't know. Suresh, what do you think about Oracle?
No, I think clearly, Oracle is also, I only, sort of took the thread that, the Google service providers, the cloud service providers.
Correct.
In that, you got IBM as well, right? I mean, Salesforce is not in that. They are clearly in the product and tool space. But clearly, if you look at Oracle, and again, Oracle is one that keeps acquiring as well. I know at one time Oracle tried to acquire Salesforce, but that didn't happen. Right. So in terms of deep pockets, you could say there are a few more. I would, Apple is another one, right? They could easily make a run as well. So, but given, I think if you're just focusing on 2021, I would say I would add IBM.
Okay.
I think everything is moving as a service, right? I mean, clearly today, AI, I think the emerging trend to me is AI as a service, right? Basically, it's an API call away, rather than you building your own infrastructure to do heavy lifting around AI. Is just an API call today, right? I mean, voice, vision, speech. So these are all API services coming out from this vendor. So AI as a service, I think, is where the industry seems to be evolving towards.
Excellent.
Excellent observation. Myself, I agree completely. Actually, I think When we talk about AI as a service, what's really happening is, you need two things. You need the engine by which to perform the heuristics and the calculations and whatnot. But you also need the data to support that and create a meaningful response. And these companies are in a position to be able to afford both. So I think what you're going to see is that these companies will form the platform, if you will, the operating system, if you will, of a myriad of different AI as a service companies that will use their services and aggregate them with others to create new products for markets. So I do agree. I think that this is definitely where things are going. And I think that each of these companies represents very different data sets and focuses in terms of what their AI as a service platforms might mean. So.
Okay, good. So let's go to the next one. Number 4, prediction number 4 is companies will capture and originate and capture more and more data going forward. Like, for example, let's look at our situation now. This whole meeting is being recorded. So we are adding more, we are capturing more data. The whole conversation is being recorded. We have more unstructured data, so on and so forth. But I also feel that companies will also have challenges in deriving value out of the data they are capturing. So there is a prediction that is going on that by 2025, the amount of data in a company is going to double every 8 hours. So that trend is already happening now, with more and more data being captured, not just through things such as blockchain or mobility or content management, so on and so forth, but in all the proliferation of unified communications and everything. So having said this, one of the contributors to the carbon footprint would be the data centers. So today, the data centers are almost like less than 2%, or today in the sense before COVID, was less than 2% of the carbon footprint was actually coming from the data centers, which included the big server farms of Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and so on and so forth. But I believe in the next few years, probably by 2025, or even by 2021, the data centers will double their contribution to the carbon footprint. And I think by next 3 to 4 years, the rate at which things are happening, the carbon footprint from data centers would be comparable to even the carbon footprint from transportation or industrialization. So this is what I see. More data is captured, but the value from data might not be commensurate with the data that is being there.
And I think I agree with this point, Prashant, because coming from the oil and gas industry, I know this is a huge thing where companies have a lot of data. A lot of it is unorganized, and companies don't really know what to do or how to handle that information, right? So definitely the oil and gas industries are quite data rich and not very good at managing their data.
Couple of things, Prashant. One is 5G. 5G is expected to create a lot of data. Second thing is fog computing. IT-OT convergence is going to create more and more data, especially with manufacturing reshoring. A lot of data on carbon footprint, yes.
Good, excellent. So IT-OT convergence is and 5G. Great observations, Venkat. What about others?
Prashant, I have a question here.
Yeah, go ahead, Venkat. Ullas.
Yeah. So I may sound naive, but I attended few of the sessions which you conducted, and there was a session by Modoc, and they have got a product which automates data cleaning, data gathering, those kind of processes. So what do you guys think that with companies having such huge data, these softwares could play a major role and could be a big market as well? because there could be a lot of automation which can be done in the process when we gather data and when we clean data, because those are standardized processes?
Oh, that's a great comment, Ulas. So, personally, I would put my 2 cents now and wait for others to say. Today, almost like 70 to 80% of the work, especially in analytics, is on data engineering. That's what Modak is, and even other companies like Informatica, SAP, and Riverside, all those players are coming into the, or even Talent and the Dell Boomi, MuleSoft. Everybody is there in the data integration space. And today, almost like 80% of the work in data analytics is on data engineering, which is cleaning and everything. So automation could be a big factor in reducing that kind of effort. But I don't think that effort might drastically reduce to close to 0 or even 10%. That effort might reduce from probably 70% to 60 or 50%. But I think with more and more data being churned, and more volatility in the markets these days, with globalization and increased acquisitions, divestitures, mergers, everything that is happening, I don't think the data engineering work will kind of reduce. It will continue to be relevant. It might reduce a little bit, but I don't think it will completely reduce. I hope I'm wrong here, but I feel that it will not go down so easily.
I think with mergers, it's going to increase because a lot of times different companies have different systems, and when they merge, they struggle to integrate everything into one common system. And I think there is plenty of opportunity on that front.
Yeah, but Ulas, great point. Great question.
Thanks, Prashant. Thanks, Mayank.
Complementing Ullas, I think the regulations, especially CCPA, California Consumer Protection, that will demand or dictate more robotic process automation. I can share more, Prashant. But today, one analyst on one consumer, it is one. I was talking to one professor who actually called CCPA one company to give what they have collected the data. CCPA mandates, regulation mandates, the consumer can go back and say, you cannot give this data. So the expense, the cost of maintaining the data manually is humongous. So the trend could be the robotic process automation of hundreds of systems collecting data, how much data to keep, and on top of that, human decision is going to be very expensive. That's going to be the GDPR and CCPA and many more regulations. That's going to be a trend probably in the future.
Excellent. Anything else? Any final thoughts before we go to point number 5?
I have a question. We might need to come back to this later. In the same point, we're going to start collecting more and more data, more and more types of data. How do you guys think, or what are your guys' thoughts on how companies and leaders should re-strategize what they're collecting, how they're collecting, and how much they should be collecting? Because they're obviously gonna collect as much as they can, but the question is, do they need to collect everything, and then what should they do now with these new types of data that they collect?
So any thoughts?
No, I think you brought up a good point, and I think it's just continuation of, one is collecting data, and as we know, there is new regulations, right? There's GDPR, and there's also this California Act, and also there is this on cookies as well, right? There is some new regulation coming on cookies where you no more will be able to elect, cookie information. Well, we are collecting more data, or we do have, rich info, rich data about consumers, but that is changing with new regulations coming in, right? And as GDPR, is actually being implemented, we'll have to see how, how AI for consumers is going to be delivered. How accurate is it going to be? Right. So I think regulations are catching up. We're all talking about being in a data-rich world, but I think regulations are catching up. It'll be interesting to see, new techniques that will be deployed to actually serve, intelligent recommendations or intelligent services for consumers, right? I think that's going to be an interesting set of dynamics in play, right? More stiffer regulations on data and how actually you could use the data to drive insights and outcomes for consumers.
Yeah, so Mike, adding to what Santosh said, it is going to be increasingly tied to the purpose or the need for collecting data. Leaders and everybody in the company should question why ask why. As Simon Sinek say that why, always start with why, the purpose. Why are you collecting this data? What would you do if, what would you lose if you don't collect this data? So, data is definitely an asset, but as I said before many times, if you don't manage it well, it can become a huge liability and a huge expense to companies as well. So question the purpose of why you are collecting data, not just because the cost of storage in the cloud is cheap or you have an agreement with one of the big cloud companies, so on and so forth.
It's more like the need versus want analysis. What you need versus what you want.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, good. Let's look at the last point. And the last point is getting talent. So location will not be a big factor in securing analytics talent. Just to give from our perspective, so I posted a note in LinkedIn, and somebody from Vietnam saw it, and we did a small project for this company in Vietnam called Viettel. So it was not part of the plan per se, but we got the work from a remote place. Mansfield Oil, for instance, I have never seen those people in Mansfield Oil so far, but this CEO, the leader from Mansfield Oil, bought my book from Amazon, and we started talking, and now we are doing a project for Mansfield Oil. So location will not be a big factor. So one of the companies whom Suresh introduced to us was ScanAI. And we were trying to staff one of our consultants in the project, and ultimately it didn't work out, but they went to a much cheaper resource in Egypt. So the company is in San Francisco. They have an offshore center in Bangalore, but for this talent, they went to Egypt. So location will not be a big factor going forward, because pretty much everybody is working from home. So whether you work from home in Panorama Hills in Calgary, or whether you work from home in Bangalore, for a company like Synovus Energy, it's not a big factor, because you are anyhow remote. Whether you are remote, either you are in the office or in front of them, or you are not. So I believe location will not be a big factor. And number two, so that means that the most important skill people can have, at least my prediction, is adaptability. How can you quickly adapt to the changing situation? Things are going to be more volatile, more disruptive going forward. So can you quickly change to the situation? So it might not be that you might be the best Python programmer, but along with this, can you adapt yourself to the changing situation? So that is going to be a big skill as well. This is what I am predicting would what 2021 would look like. Any thoughts on point 5?
I have a lot of thoughts on point 5, but I think one of the challenges is in Alberta, we have a very myopic view as to how work is done and how we work in a remote fashion. I'll be very brief, but I'll share a story. When I worked at Encana many years ago, before Encana split, I remember I had a session where one of our developers had been working from home the previous week because they were feeling ill. And so we got called into a boardroom and we were told, we were admonished, well, he was anyhow, but we, the message to us was that, and I quote, we are not a company that's equipped to enable remote working. And so we expect people to be here. Now, as this comment was made, I remember all of us looking around the room, seeing digital whiteboards, seeing cameras, seeing the video conferencing equipment in the room and all of the mics around the room. And we just kind of laughed because it was ridiculous. And so I think that this mentality that you need to be geolocated in close proximity is very dated. And I think that if there is a good thing or silver lining in this whole COVID mess, it is that companies have been forced to come into at least the 21st century now in terms of how they conduct their business and work collectively. The only caveat I will say in regards to this, Prashant, is that I think that remote working will work fine, and it will become a big deal. The challenge with it is twofold. One is in the tools and the processes and how companies address and work with remote employees and resources. But the other thing is that time zone. I think that time zone's a killer, because unless you have a business model where you have distinct teams in different time zones, then it can be very difficult to manage that. And that comes from personal experience. I don't mean a time zone where it's 1 hour off. I mean when you have like an 8-hour difference, right? Like a significant difference. So those are my thoughts on it. But I think this is bang on. I think it's about time, and I think it really comes down to having effective leadership in these companies that can properly guide and leverage all the resources and talents that become available to you when you open your doors to people outside of your 1 hour drive time.
Okay, great. Chris, anything else?
Yeah, there was some study done by Harvard, I guess, recently, Harvard or some university. Along with the acceptance and advantages, the emotional aspects of remote working and the corresponding incentive alignment, those two are two topics, which are going to come up while doing the workforce automation and accepting remote working. So any tools, any automation, any analytics around workforce automation to have employee emotions and compensation structure, that is going to be very huge, big in the coming years. That's what the study says.
Okay, excellent. Any questions, thoughts from others? Okay, good. Now, after this 5, let's go to the other 6, number 6, number 7, whatever. So we'll start with number 6. Chris, you had number 6?
Yeah, so it doesn't elude me that the audience here is largely predicated around data and analytics and whatnot. And so what I would like to do is provide a 6th item. And first, I'd say, recall that data is impacted by upstream decisions, right? So, I feel that we're in a world now where there's a lot of new functionality coming out, a lot of great ideas, and data is no longer a byproduct; it's an equal citizen. But it's often inexorably linked to some new function, some new process, some new idea, and so. My prediction really centers around this, and it's that in the past we've seen the struggle between integrated systems versus what I'll call enterprise systems, meaning we've had multiple systems that would handle best of breed kind of pieces or problems in a business to solve them. And over the years, we then went to a system where we started to aggregate these. And in the early days, it was very painful because there were no integration standards, data standards, and everything were very loosely defined. And software to support this, like data warehouses, were very complex and expensive back in the early days. So I think then you saw the opportunity for what I'll call these monolithic solutions. So SAP is a really good example. So the appeal of SAP was, why deal with 20 different little software systems trying to integrate them when you can just buy this one system, it's turnkey, and away you go. Over the last decade, I feel like this has largely fallen out of favor, and so we're seeing a resurgence of best of breed over monolithic. Where I think we're going to land, and this is my prediction over the next decade, is that we're really going to see a focus more on aggregations of best of breed than we are monolithic. So monolithic will always be a player. There are large companies who have invested a lot of money in these systems, and they aren't going to go away. However, as new functionality comes up, as we have a lot of change, automation, AI plays a bigger role, we're going to start to see some of the functionality, much of the functionality these systems solve, be impacted and changed in many different ways. And so I don't believe that an SAP or an Oracle or whoever is going, even a Microsoft, these companies aren't going to be able to acquire companies and keep up fast enough for the needs of the organizations. So you will see these fringe systems become part of an aggregation. So my prediction is really that you're going to see the rise and you're going to see a second wave of best of breed aggregated systems that will form an enterprise's core software ecosystem in favor of investing huge amounts of money in singular monolithic systems. And why I think that's important when speaking to folks with a data analytics perspective or an interest in that realm is because the impact of this decision is going to mean that some technologies like cloud-based data warehousing and data lakes in particular are going to become really, really important, right? So I think that the era of data is going to be a very bright one. I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I think one of the drivers of that is going to be this need for companies to aggregate these systems into their software ecosystem, and all of the different reporting and analytics and integration challenges that represents are going to be more and more resolved by data integrations than they would traditional programming APIs. So that's my thought, Prashant, is I really think that.
Excellent. So, Chris, then how does that play with point number 3? So one, you have the solutions, then these vendors are also converging. So how do you think that would happen? Indirectly, will the vendors push for monolithic solutions then?
Yeah. So I think where that plays, I think it dovetails very well into it. And I think, like I said earlier, those companies, those platforms you see, those are going to be the engines through which you're going to be able to digest this data and gain better value from it, right? So I think a good example of this is this. With Microsoft, for instance, you can use their workflow type systems. And so you'll see a company acquire a couple different products, and then to link them together in their organization, they might use something from the Microsoft platform in order to create a workflow system to tie these systems together. And then they behave as one system from the perspective of the company. And so when you talk about the data side, the analytics side, these platforms then become, as I said, the operating system, if you will, the foundation by which you're able to perform all these advanced analytics.
Excellent.
I think that's an excellent observation. I think that's an excellent observation, because I mean, if I summarize, Chris, what you're saying is the time for the monolithic such as SAP Oracle has come. Is what you're saying is basically there will be smaller niche players offering say whatever FICO as a module, and then given the API economy and the data economy, you can anyway plug and play and integrate systems, right? That's where you made the point about a data lake and whole microservices coming into being. With these things emerging, why do we need a monolithic, right? And I think that's where you're going. right?
Exactly.
And today, SAP is wall to wall. Yes, they are great for, some functional areas. Is it great for all the functional areas? The answer is absolutely no. Did customers have a choice? No, because they wanted one single platform. But today, whether I think, microservices and, we talked about AI as a service, data as a service, why do you actually need this, right? And the compute and storage has fallen down. You could integrate everything onto a cloud platform and plug and play different best of breed. Is that's the point you're trying to make? The time for best of breed has come versus the monolith. I think that's the point you're making. Yeah.
I think that sums it up really well, and I think you can look to the monolithic systems themselves for evidence of this. If you look at the SAPs of today, they're really starting to set, or just take Salesforce as an example. They're really focusing on having a Salesforce marketplace with all the third-party connections. And what their goal is to have these systems use Salesforce as that platform to drive them. But holistically, from the corporation's point of view, from the company's point of view, the customer's point of view, rather, they see Salesforce as merely a foundation, a platform, a highway, if you will. That's not necessarily what drives the most value for them. What drives the most value might be the other integrations that play into this, right? And then holistically, that's what drives them towards the high value. But for Salesforce, it makes them sticky because they're part of that equation. So, anyways, yeah, I think that's a good summary, Santosh. Thanks.
Okay, good. So we are running out of time. So any thoughts? Point number 7. Do you have prediction 7? We have 6 now.
This is Santosh here. I mean, I just acceleration of the connected economy. I think that's I think Venkat kind of alluding to that, but I think there's an acceleration to the connected economy. What I mean is 5G coming in and innovation that are happening with edge, right, and also at the silicon level, right, where we are having silicon basically geared to run MI models. So I think there's going to be a massive acceleration in the connected economy, just because the foundational technology, which is connectivity, 5G, innovations with edge, and also at the silicon, I think that's going to be a big, a game changer. Yeah.
And Prashant, I texted some in the chat. If we are running out of time, maybe you can look at the chat. One prediction I am seriously contemplating is the data translation and storytelling as a skill and service. There's a huge talent gap. It is two actually. Translation and storytelling as a skill and as a service. We can do 2 by 2 and then target some industries.
Okay, excellent. Okay, good guys. So we got 7 key predictions. I will just summarize it and I will send it to everybody. So let's continue. There's a couple of more slides, so let's go forward. So before we stop this Zoom recording, can we take a group picture? So I'll turn off because my camera is already on.